Do you believe in the unseen? Welcome, brave souls, to the haunting reels.
The stairs groan under my boots. The flashlight shakes in my hand. Whatever's down here. It wasn't meant to be found. Jars, rows and rows of them. And inside eyes. Human eyes. One has my name on it. Grandfather's handwriting crawls across the page. The house is alive, and it's hungry. The door whispers. The symbols pulse. He wasn't insane. He was right. The walls breathe. The jars rattle. And the eyes, oh God, the eyes are blinking. They see everything. I don't know if that's a warning or an invitation. The walls sigh. The floor shifts. This house isn't just alive, it's hungry. I'm unraveling. The real question is, what's left when I come undone? Truth, at last. The book's glow licks at my fingers. I smirk. Let the world burn. I never wanted to go back. Not to the memories. Not to the house. But I had nowhere else to go. My name is Ethan Blackwood, and I'm a writer, or at least I used to be. Somewhere along the way, the stories stopped coming. The characters grew silent, and the shadows in my mind became louder than the words I used to write. Depression clung to me like a second skin. Days bled into nights, and nights were no better, riddled with sleep paralysis and hallucinations that felt far too real. I'd wake up unable to move, a pressure on my chest, a figure lurking in the corner of the room, whispering my name. My therapist said it was stress. My ex said it was madness. Then, out of the blue, a letter arrived. Thick parchment. Wax seal. My name written in elegant, old-fashioned cursive. To Mr. Ethan Blackwood. You are the sole surviving heir to the Blackwood estate, including the family manor located in Ravens Hollow. Your presence is required to finalize the inheritance. Blackwood Manor. I barely remembered it. Just fragments running down endless hallways as a boy. The scent of burning wood and a sense of dread I couldn't quite place. My parents had cut ties with the Blackwood side when I was young. They never explained why. But desperation makes you ignore gut instincts. The letter felt like a lifeline, a reset. Maybe a change of scenery would stir something inside me, help me write again. Or maybe I was just tired of sleeping in a one-bedroom apartment that smelled like mold and failure. So I packed up my life for what little of it remained and drove 6 hours north to Ravens Hollow. The town was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of place where strangers are noticed and rarely welcomed. I asked for directions at a small diner on the edge of town, and the woman behind the counter froze when I mentioned Blackwood Manor. You're moving in? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded. She gave a nervous glance to the cook behind her, then leaned in. That house is wrong, mister. It's hungry. People who go there don't come back the same. Some don't come back at all. I laughed it off at the time. Locals and their ghost stories. Every small town has them. But even as I chuckled and thanked her for the warning, my stomach twisted. Blackwood Manor stood on a hill overlooking the valley, surrounded by a forest so thick it looked like it had grown to protect or trap it. The iron gate groaned as I pushed it open, revealing a gravel path choked with weeds. The house itself was enormous and weathered, Victorian style, with pointed gables, boarded windows, and a roof that sagged with the weight of years. Ivy strangled the outer walls like veins feeding into something old and decaying. I unlocked the front door with a heavy iron key. The hinges screamed in protest. The air inside was stale, thick with dust and something else. something sour and metallic. My footsteps echoed as I explored the main floor. Every room was frozen in time, like someone had just stepped out and never returned. An old grandfather clock ticked away in the foyer, despite no signs of power. Portraits lined the walls, gaunt faces with hollow eyes watching my every move. That first night I tried to sleep in what must have once been the guest bedroom. I placed a heavy chair against the door. Old habit. I shouldn't have bothered. Around 2:17 a.m. I remember the exact time I awoke to the sound of scratching. Faint at first, then louder. It came from inside the walls. Not mice, not rats. This was deliberate, like fingernails dragging across the wood, searching. I held my breath and listened. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. I slipped out of bed, grabbed the flashlight from my bag, and tiptoed to the door. The chair hadn't moved, yet the scratching continued. When I finally opened the door, the hallway was empty. Except it wasn't the same hallway I'd seen before bed. There was a new door at the far end, one that hadn't been there before. I approached it cautiously. The brass knob was warm to the touch. I hesitated, then twisted it open. Just a broom closet. But standing at the other end of the hall, near the staircase, was a figure. Pale, thin, motionless. Its eyes locked onto mine. I blinked and it was gone. The next morning, I blamed it all on exhaustion. Maybe the sleep paralysis had followed me here. Maybe I hadn't truly woken up. But as the days passed, things only got worse. I'd hear voices whispering my name in the dead of night. Books fell off shelves with no one near them. My laptop would open on its own, pages filling with gibberish I couldn't delete. Once, I found all the mirrors in the house covered in soot. Another time, every clock had reset to 3:33 a.m. Still, I stayed. Partly out of pride, partly out of necessity, and partly because the house began to inspire me. Words returned, dark, twisted stories poured out of me, better than anything I'd ever written. It was as if the manor itself was feeding me ideas. But at what cost? I found the journals in the attic. It was a stormy evening. The lights flickered as I explored the upper levels, drawn by a door that had somehow appeared between two old wardrobes. The attic smelled like mildew and old leather. Dust danced in the flashlight's beam. I stumbled across a trunk, bound in cracked leather and sealed with a strange symbol etched in silver. Inside were journals, dozens of them. The handwriting was familiar. Dr. Elias Blackwood, my grandfather. I never knew much about him. My father rarely spoke of him, except to say he was not right in the head. But as I flipped through the brittle pages, a different story unfolded. Dr. Blackwood had been a renowned psychiatrist, at least in the beginning. But something changed when he inherited the manor. According to the journals, he believed the house had psychic energy that could amplify the human mind. He began conducting experiments on patients. He brought them here, not for healing, but for observation, pushing them into madness, sleep deprivation, sensory manipulation, isolation in complete darkness. Some entries describe things no sane man should believe. Communicating with the dead, glimpsing other realities, summoning entities through thought alone. One passage stood out, scrawled in red ink. The house is alive. It feeds off us, our fear, our pain, our souls. It whispers truths no man should hear. It is not haunted, it is sentient, I opened the door too wide. I can't close it. The final entries grew chaotic, paranoid, frantic. He claimed something had crossed over, that it had taken root inside the walls, that it wore the faces of the dead. Then the writing stopped altogether. I dropped the journal and stumbled back, my skin crawling. That night, I dreamt of a man with no eyes standing at the foot of my bed. When I woke up, muddy footprints led from the attic door to my bedroom. I began to understand then. The house hadn't waited for me. It had remembered me. I started seeing people in mirrors. People I knew were dead. My mother, her mouth stitched shut. My grandfather, whispering nonsense. My younger self, crying and pointing behind me. Each time I turned, nothing was there. I tried to leave. I packed my bags and walked to the front door, but the knob wouldn't turn. No matter how hard I pulled or kicked, the door refused to open. I ran to the back door. Same result. I tried the windows, nailed shut from the inside. The power went out. My phone had no signal. I was trapped. The manor had let me in, but it had no intention of letting me go. I began sleeping during the day, afraid of what the nights would bring. The lines between dream and reality blurred. I'd wake up with scratches down my arms, words carved into the walls around me. Stay. Listen. Remember. Then I found the hidden room. The basement was off limits, or so I thought. The door had always been sealed with rusted chains. But one morning, the chains were gone. Inside was a narrow stairwell that descended far deeper than any basement should go. The walls were lined with mirrors, not glass reflections. I saw moments from my past as I descended. My childhood. My first hallucination. The night I tried to end my life. All displayed like memories behind a pane of water. Then I reached the chamber at the bottom, a circular room, stone floor. Candles lit on their own as I entered. At the center, a chair, and in that chair, a figure, wrapped in cloth, face covered. But it stood as I approached, mimicking my every move. Then it spoke, with my voice. You are what he made you. I backed away, but the figure followed. You were always meant to return. You were born from the house. You carry its legacy. I ran. I don't remember how I got back to my room. I just remember waking up in bed, soaked in sweat, with the figure's words echoing in my skull. That was 3 nights ago. Now I sit here, writing this, because I don't know how much longer I have. The house has started showing me things, possible futures. I see myself wandering these halls forever, my mind shattered, becoming just another ghost in the Blackwood bloodline. But I have to finish this. Someone needs to know. If you're reading this, don't come looking for me. Don't come near Blackwood Manor. The house is not haunted. It is hungry, and it remembers you too. I don't remember exactly when I first noticed the morning repeating. It wasn't something obvious, not at first. It began with a sense of déjà vu, a strange certainty that I had already brushed my teeth while staring at the rust-stained mirror, that I had already burnt my toast, already listened to the kettle scream. I told myself it was stress, the move into my grandfather's old house, the silence that clung to the place like a second skin, the unease that had settled deep in my bones the moment I turned the key in the front door. But then it happened again, and again. Each morning, I woke up to the same pale sunlight spilling through the dusty curtains, the same creak in the floorboards when I stepped out of bed. The same hollow knocking sound that echoed from somewhere deep in the walls. I tried to change things to break the loop. One morning, I skipped breakfast and sprinted straight out the door, only to blink and find myself back in bed. Another time, I stayed up all night, pacing the halls, only to feel my eyelids droop against my will. When I opened them, it was morning again. The same damn morning. It was around the 5th or 6th cycle that I began noticing things that hadn't been there before. Little details. Impossible ones. A room appeared at the end of the hallway. I knew, with absolute certainty, it hadn't been there yesterday, or ever. The walls were lined with shelves, all filled with identical dusty jars. Each jar had a name scratched into the glass, and inside, a single, withered human tooth. That night I stared into the bathroom mirror and saw my reflection tilt its head when I didn't. It smiled at me, not a kind smile, but a knowing one. One that understood I was beginning to unravel. I smashed that mirror with a trembling fist, but by the next morning, it was whole again. Pristine. Waiting. I started peeling up floorboards in my room, desperate to find something. A clue. An escape hatch. Even a reason. What I found chilled me to the marrow. Names. Dozens of them. They were etched violently into the wood, as if by fingernails. Some I recognized from old family stories, patients of my grandfather, a once renowned psychiatrist who had treated troubled minds within these very walls. But others were unfamiliar, and that scared me more. I found my own name 2 days later. That's when the panic set in. That night I saw him again. I'd glimpsed the figure before, always at the edges of my vision. A tall man in a charcoal suit, skin stretched tight over his bones, eyes like smoldering coals. He didn't walk. He glided, like a shadow bent out of shape. I froze as he emerged from the far end of the hallway, the air warping around him like heat rising off pavement. He looked at me, and in that gaze was endless, meticulous malice. He whispered something, though his lips never moved. I couldn't hear the words, but they roared in my head like 1,000 voices, screaming in unison. I collapsed, and when I woke again, it was morning. Same sunlight, same creaking floorboard, same time loop, but the hallway was different, longer. More doors had appeared. I tried to call anyone, but the phone never had a dial tone. I found my cell in my pocket, but there was no signal, no battery, no time. The clock on the wall was stuck at 7:14 a.m., eternally. Eventually, I stopped trying to fight it. I started exploring the house, hoping to map it out, to understand the shifting architecture. Every morning, I would pick a new hallway, a new door. Some rooms looped back on themselves. Others defied logic entirely, spiral staircases that ended in brick walls, windows that looked out into pitch-black voids, and once, a room where it was snowing, indoors, and in that snow were footprints leading in, but none leading out. I followed them anyway. That's when I saw him again. The man in the suit. But this time, he spoke. "I am the architect," he said, voice like glass grinding against bone. "I do not build houses. I remake them, according to what you bring inside." "What does that mean?" I whispered. He smiled, an expression so wide and thin it looked inhuman. "It means this house knows you better than you know yourself." And then he vanished. I stumbled backward into the snow and ran until I collapsed. When I woke up, I was in my bed. Morning, again. But now I had a name. The architect. I began putting things together. My grandfather hadn't just lived here. He'd worked here. Treated patients in secret. Broken people who weren't healed, but hidden. I found journal pages in the attic detailing unorthodox treatments, a method of mind isolation through environmental conditioning. Madness turned into architecture. Fear made manifest. And me? I was a patient once. The memory hit like a sledgehammer to the brain, fractured and sudden. A flash of white rooms, screams in the distance, a small version of myself, crying in the corner, while my grandfather held my head in his hands and whispered, "Forget. For your own good. Forget." He erased me. Erased this, hid it deep inside the folds of my brain like a tumor wrapped in silk. I had been here before, as a child. That's why everything felt familiar, yet wrong. The sense of déjà vu wasn't just the time loop. It was memory fighting its way to the surface. The architect had been watching me ever since, feeding off my rediscovery. Each loop, the house grew more intense, more alive. The walls pulsed, the lights flickered like heartbeats. The rooms changed based on what I was feeling. Guilt, fear, shame. One hallway was lined with mirrors, each showing a version of me screaming, clawing at the glass. In another, I found my grandfather's eyes black as pitch, whispering apologies that echoed endlessly down the corridor. I screamed at him. He just cried. Eventually, I found a room labeled the nursery. Inside were drawings I had made as a child, crayon scrawls of the man in the suit, of screaming faces, of people melting into the walls. I wasn't the first, and I wouldn't be the last. The architect wasn't just a ghost. He was a force, a manifestation of collective trauma, fed by the minds of those who stepped into his domain. He reshaped the house according to what you feared most, creating a prison uniquely tailored to its occupant. And he liked me. He liked my broken mind. One night I stood in the main hallway and shouted into the void, "What do you want from me?" The house answered. Doors slammed in unison. The lights died. The walls bled. And the architect stepped out of the darkness, holding a small, worn teddy bear in one hand. My teddy bear. He placed it at my feet, then knelt so that we were eye to eye. "I want you to remember," he whispered. And I did. All of it. The experiments. The screaming. My grandfather locking me in a room for days at a time, convinced that sensory deprivation would heal my mind. The architect first came to me in those dark, silent hours. I thought he was imaginary. A friend. Someone to talk to in the silence. But I had made him real. I gave him form. I gave him purpose. And when my mind broke, my grandfather did what he thought was best. He wiped the slate clean. He locked away the truth behind a smile and gave me a new life. But you can't bury something like that forever. Eventually, it claws its way back up. Eventually, the house calls you home. I'm writing this down in the hope that someone, someday, will read it and understand that this house is alive. It remembers, it feeds, and it always brings its children back. I don't know how many loops I've gone through now. Time has no meaning here. The architect appears more frequently, always with that grin. Sometimes he speaks in riddles. Other times, he just watches, waiting. For what, I'm not sure. Maybe for me to break again. Maybe for me to choose to stay. Or maybe for me to become something else entirely. A few mornings ago, I noticed something new. My reflection in the mirror is starting to act on its own again, but this time, it looks happy. content, like it's accepted the truth. This house is me, and I am it. I found my grandfather's name scratched into the floorboards yesterday, his final confession etched beside mine. We are all prisoners here, but some of us become wardens. And as the house continues to shift, reshape, and whisper in the dark, I wonder, am I still Ethan, or am I becoming the next architect? The loop begins again tomorrow, and I can't wait to see what the house will show me next. I don't remember when the house first started changing me. Maybe it was subtle at first. A creak in the floorboards that echoed a little too long. A shadow on the wall that didn't belong to anything in the room. I moved in thinking it was just an old family property, inherited from my grandfather after he passed. A chance to start over. But I was wrong. The house didn't just creak and moan like old wood tends to. It whispered. At night, when I tried to sleep, I heard voices behind the walls. Not words exactly. More like emotions carried on breathless tones. Despair, longing, madness. At first, I blamed my own frayed mind. I'd been struggling for years, in and out of therapy, never quite stable. I thought the isolation would help me heal. But the house had other plans. It began with the mirror. I stood brushing my teeth one morning when I noticed something strange in the reflection. I stopped mid-motion. The man in the mirror me was still brushing. I froze. He didn't. I watched in horror as my reflection continued the routine, calmly rinsing and setting the toothbrush down, then staring directly at me with a vacant, knowing smile. I dropped the brush, stumbling away. When I looked back, the reflection had returned to normal, mimicking my every movement again like it should. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light, a tired mind playing games. But it wasn't. The changes got worse. One day I glanced down and saw my hands shriveled and liver-spotted, like those of a 90-year-old. The next day, they were youthful, smooth, and unblemished. It wasn't just my hands. My reflection would change randomly, sometimes looking far older or younger than I really was. Other times, it would look off, like someone trying to impersonate me and almost getting it right. But the worst part was that I could feel the changes. My skin would itch and tighten, then loosen again. My joints would ache as if swollen with age, only to feel spry and weightless hours later. My body was no longer mine. The house was reshaping me, day by day. I should have left. I packed once, even made it to the front door. But when I touched the doorknob, I felt something, not a shock, but a kind of pressure, like a deep vibration that moved through my bones. My vision blurred, and I saw images flashing across my mind like a reel of broken film. Faces twisted and screaming. A hallway with no end. A version of me standing in the dark, eyes missing. I let go of the handle and collapsed to the floor, shaking. I never tried to leave again. The more I searched for answers, the deeper the house pulled me in. It was like it wanted me to understand something, to see it fully. That's how I found the basement. It wasn't on any of the blueprints I inherited. The door revealed itself one night, behind the bookshelf in the study. I heard a low groan and saw the shelf crack down the middle, slowly creaking open to reveal a narrow stone stairwell leading into pitch black. I took a flashlight, descended the steps, and found something that haunts me more than anything else. The basement was lined wall to wall with shelves, each filled with identical glass jars. At first I thought they were specimens, preserved animals, maybe. But when I got closer, I realized they were eyes. Human eyes, floating in murky preservation fluid. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Some wide with fear, others eerily calm. Each jar had a name etched on a small brass plate beneath it. One of them said, Peter Walsh. That was when it hit me. The stories about him being a madman, locked away after my grandmother died. I'd always believed he went insane with grief, but now I wasn't so sure. There were journals in the corner, stacked in crates covered in dust. I read them all over the next few days. My grandfather had been experimenting, not with people, not on people, but through the house. He believed the house wasn't cursed. It was a conduit, a living organism that could reshape the mind by reshaping the body. He wrote, "The house is not evil. It is a surgeon. Crude, perhaps. Indiscriminate, certainly. But it sees the fractures within us, the things we try to bury. It peels us open and rebuilds us in its own image. Those who resist become distorted, but those who surrender might be saved." He had offered himself to the house willingly, hoping to be healed, hoping to cure his depression, his mania, the fractured thoughts that haunted him. He wanted to find a way to help others like him, like me. At first I felt horror, then something else, understanding. I've battled my demons for as long as I can remember. Dark thoughts, voices that tell me I'm not real, that I'm just a copy of someone who failed a long time ago. I've tried medication, therapy, support groups, even hospitalization. Nothing stuck. The house, it knows. It sees the broken parts of me. I think it's been trying to fix me from the start. But it's not gentle. The process hurts. It tears down who you were without asking permission. And what's left isn't always recognizable. I started noticing other things. Furniture that moved on its own. Paintings that changed slightly each time I passed. A photo of my mother I kept on the nightstand showed her smiling, then frowning, then on one occasion, crying blood. I stopped looking in mirrors altogether. My reflection no longer needed me to be present. It stared out even when I wasn't in the room. I caught it watching me once from across the hall, its face twitching inhumanly, eyes wide and shimmering with delight. Then came the dreams, or maybe they were visions. The house showed me other people, strangers, wandering its halls, their faces half melted, their minds split open like broken glass. Some crawled on the ceiling, others cried out in languages I'd never heard, in tones that burrowed under my skin. I saw myself among them, my eyes missing, but my smile, content. The final journal entry from my grandfather was short. I let it in. It peeled away my madness like skin. What I am now is clearer, if less human. But I am no longer afraid. This house doesn't feed on fear. It consumes confusion. It devours uncertainty. And in return, it grants clarity. It makes you whole. But you must let it. That was the choice he made. Now it's my turn. I stand in the basement again, surrounded by eyes. They stare at me, hollow and eternal. Not in accusation, but in witness. They are all pieces of people who chose, one way or another, to give themselves over, to be remade. I feel the house breathing around me, not literally, but energetically. The walls pulse faintly. The wood creaks, not from strain, but from intention. It's waiting, watching, offering, and I feel the split inside me widening. My mind is fraying, unable to cope with what I've seen and what I now understand. I'm no longer just Ethan. I'm a chrysalis, a liminal thing, neither healed nor whole. If I leave, I know what waits for me. The same fragmented life. Pills, panic, a sense of never quite belonging in the world. I'll always be hunting for stability, always wondering if I'll wake up tomorrow and recognize the man in the mirror. But if I stay, if I surrender to the house's design, I may lose what's left of who I used to be. I may become something else entirely, something not quite human. But maybe, just maybe I'll become whole. I don't know if that's salvation or damnation, but I know the house will not wait forever. The light in the basement dims as the jars begin to glow faintly, the eyes within shimmering with impossible hues, violet silver, black like oil. I feel my body trembling, not with fear, but with anticipation, with potential. The house speaks now, not in words, but through sensation. It offers no promises, only the path. So here I stand, on the edge of what I was and what I could become. I hear the floorboards above me creak with the weight of possibilities. The mirror calls from upstairs, its reflection waiting to show me my final form. I close my eyes, and I decide. The air was thick, not with smoke or dust or anything tangible, no. This was the kind of thickness that sat inside your lungs, like grief, like regret. I stumbled forward, the hallway stretching longer with every step. The wood beneath my feet moaned like a wounded animal, the floorboards twisting beneath my weight, almost as if the house itself was trying to warn me away. But it was too late for warnings. I was in the heart of it now, the heart of him. I reached the grand hall of Blackwood Manor, what remained of it. The walls bled ink-black tendrils that pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. Shadows crawled along the corners, whispering my name in voices that were half-forgotten memories. A large mirror stood at the end of the chamber, cracked but still whole, reflecting not the room but something else, a darker place. A world built from nightmares and rot. Then he appeared. The architect, not with fanfare, not with thunder. He simply was. A tall figure in a suit, woven from the void, face blurred like smeared paint, yet unmistakably familiar. And when he spoke, his voice came not from his mouth, but from within my own skull. "Hello, Ethan." My knees nearly buckled. "I'm tired," I whispered, not sure if I meant it physically, mentally, or both. I fought so hard to escape this place, to understand it. "You never wanted to escape," he said, walking closer. His footsteps made no sound. "You came here to be devoured." "No," I said, fists clenched. "I came to find inspiration, to beat the block, to finish what I started." He laughed a broken, mirthless noise. "You didn't come to write, Ethan. You came to punish yourself." I wanted to deny it, to scream, to prove him wrong. But inside something shattered, because I knew he was right. Every sleepless night, every bottle of whiskey, every draft thrown into the fire because it wasn't perfect. I'd bled for the words, and still, they betrayed me. The block wasn't a wall, it was a mirror. And now, I was staring into it. The architect stepped aside, and the walls melted away like candle wax in summer heat. In their place stood a million versions of me, angry, disappointed, bitter. Some wore the face I'd seen in the mirror for years. Others were twisted beyond human. One wept. One screamed. One laughed as he carved his own face off with a quill pen. The architect extended his hand toward me. "Let us rebuild you." I didn't move. He continued, more gently now. "You've tried to patch the cracks with success, with solitude, with lies. But the rot is in your bones, Ethan. Let us strip you down to the foundation. Let us rebuild you into something stronger, something true." "And if I refuse?" I asked, voice barely a whisper. "You won't." And he was right. I was so tired. So tired of pretending. I dropped to my knees, not in submission, but in surrender. Not to him, not to the house, but to myself. "I can't carry this anymore," I said. "Take it." The moment I said those words, the world fractured. The floor split beneath me. The ceiling rained down in flaming shards. The screaming versions of myself blurred and dissolved into ash. The architect opened his arms, embracing the chaos, smiling as the house collapsed in on itself like a dying star. But I didn't scream. I didn't run. I closed my eyes and let go. When I opened them again, it was morning. Not a surreal half-light or the red dusk of a nightmare, but honest, golden sunlight spilling across warm wooden floors. I was lying in the grand bedroom of Blackwood Manor, but everything was pristine. The curtains danced in a soft breeze. The fireplace crackled gently. Dust motes spun lazily in the air. It was impossible. I sat up slowly, my limbs heavy with confusion, but free of pain. The scars were gone, from my hands, from my mind. I swung my legs off the bed and walked barefoot to the mirror above the dresser. It was whole, clear, and so was I. My eyes weren't bloodshot. My skin wasn't pale. There were no shadows following me, no whispers in the corners. Blackwood Manor was restored, as if none of it had ever happened. I wandered the halls in disbelief. The wallpaper was fresh. The paintings hung straight. The piano in the music room played a haunting lullaby all on its own, but somehow it wasn't ominous. It was beautiful. The smell of coffee wafted through the air. I followed it to the kitchen. On the counter was a steaming mug. No note, no explanation, just the coffee and my old notebook. It was open, blank, save for one sentence on the first page. My breath caught in my throat, because the handwriting wasn't mine. I leaned closer. The words were written in delicate, looping script. "Tell the truth, Ethan, or we will." A cold sweat broke across my back. But then, something clicked. My hands moved on their own, flipping to the next page. I wrote like I was on fire. The words came in a flood years of blocked creativity, released in a single, unstoppable surge. Characters, plot twists, dialogue. I couldn't stop. Didn't want to. I laughed. I cried. I shouted into the empty room, and the house listened. Every keystroke, every pen stroke, I could feel the walls pulsing in rhythm. We were one now, me and the house, and I understood at last. The architect hadn't been my enemy. He was the infection rising to the surface. And Blackwood Manor, it hadn't been cursed. It had been cleansing me, breaking me down brick by brick, stripping away every lie I told myself about who I was and why I couldn't create. And now I was rebuilt, reclaimed, reforged. I wrote until my fingers ached, until the light outside dimmed to twilight, until the fire was low and the coffee cold. Then I stopped, just for a moment, just to breathe. And that's when I noticed the sentence had changed. The first one, the one I hadn't written, it was no longer, "Tell the truth, Ethan, or we will." Now it simply read, "Welcome home." A whisper followed it, not from the room, but from the house itself. Deep, familiar, loving, terrifying. I turned slowly, expecting to see someone behind me, but there was no one, only the flicker of candlelight, and my own reflection in the glass cabinet door. Except my eyes weren't entirely mine. They were deeper, older. Something else looked back from inside me, and it smiled.